the link on LinkedIn. We're gonna tell everybody that we're going live, and we're gonna go live really in like 1 minute. Okay.
Testing, 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 testing. All right, there we go. Hello, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Aaron.
There we go. How you doing?
Okay, guys. Good, man. So let me just update the polls that we're live, and we're starting with the web. You guys can talk, you know.
Yes,
wasn't
guys.
sure if we're going live.
Yeah, thanks for the notice, man.
How's Sorry, please go ahead.
I'm just yapping around here. Where you guys at right now? I'm in Kuala Lumpur, by the way. It's 1 a.m. and I'm drinking coffee
I'm
to
in Shanghai,
stay awake.
it's also 1 a.m.
Where are you?
Shanghai, it's also 1 a.m.
Shanghai. Wow, welcome to the club. All right.
Okay, guys, we're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So let's start. Let me share my screen, and we can start with the webinar. Hey, everybody, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, everybody, this is Nick Penev. You probably haven't seen me in the last 2 months. I was on vacation, surfing, all this kind of stuff. So, but fun is over, you know. We need to talk about expansion because we need to make money. Otherwise, we don't have money to spend in the summer. So, the joke aside, we're gonna talk about global expansion. We have 5 experts here who are gonna talk about different markets, some of the markets we've never covered before. So we have Dano, Falk, founder of DefDevice. He's gonna talk about Japan. We've never covered this market. We also have Mike Begg, who is founder of MZ Advisor. He's gonna talk about the expansion to the USA. Everybody knows about the USA, but Mike has been doing that for a long time. They have helped over 500 brands to expand to those markets. And so he's gonna give you some tips. Nick, who is president of Europe and APAC and AMZ Advisor, is gonna talk about Europe and the expansion to Europe because it's probably one of the markets that it's probably hard, but it's probably one of the best that you should consider for Q4, or actually for Q4 is already late, but for next year. Ramiro is gonna talk about LATAM, and Ryan, who is the founder of Freight for Digital, he cannot talk about that. So Sandra Weiss, who is the media executive of Freight for Digital, is going to talk about expansion to Southeast Asia. So we're going to cover all the major markets today. And I'm your host, Nick Penev. I'm the co-founder of Extreme Power Brand Scale. I run a partnership network with 1,000 partners, and you can see 5 of those guys here who are helping out e-commerce sellers to get educated, because if you don't know what to do, you're not going to do anything. We also have a software called Scale, which facilitates introductions between partners. That's why we have so many partners. And I'm also a webinar host, as you've noticed. I enjoy hosting those webinars and inviting experts to share their tips. And the last thing, which I'm very proud of, I've been remote for the last 13 years. It was long before it was cool. So let's hop and introduce the partners of today's webinar. The gold sponsors are Extreme Power Brands, which is my partnership agency, and Scale. The partnership agency and the network provides the help for companies to grow through partnerships. Scale is a SaaS tool that we've built to facilitate the introductions and referrals flows between partners. So consider that to grow your company without spending any money for paid marketing. The first giveaway is from Extreme Power Brands. They're giving away $1,000, which is a free partnership audit for you. You need to be an e-commerce service provider to qualify. We're going to tell you if you guys suck at partnership, if you're great, or if you need to improve. And Scale is totally free for right now. So here is the link, and you can sign up. But don't need to write down anything. We're going to send a follow-up email with those information. And also we have our silver sponsor, which is the expansion to your partner squad by Hello Tax. Hello Tax, the VAT compliance provider, my first client, and provide one of the major obstacles for a brand to expand, which is the VAT. But this is not everything. No, we have an all-in-one expansion package which covers accounting automation, product compliance, logistic custom translations, research funding, ethic bonuses, and agency recommendation. You can actually see one of the agencies that recommend for Europe, which is AMZ Advisors. And the giveaway per brand here is 300,000, like 3K plus. You can get more depending on how much you're doing right now in your home market. And the last but not the least sponsor is Dobias. These are our creative partners. They're an award-winning creative service company for Amazon sellers that designs product infographics, EBC images, and videos. They offer free complete sets of EBC images for free, value $600 US. And like I said, we're gonna send that in the follow-up email tomorrow and with the recording and everything. So, and wait for more deals from our speakers today. And right now we're gonna jump to the topic. First is gonna go Dano. He's gonna talk about Japan, the lucrative potential of Amazon Japan. Then it would be Nick. Nick, I'm not gonna mess up the last name. So Nick, the other Nick, with the Italian name. He's gonna talk about how to give your brand a leg up with the right global expansion plan for European markets. Then Ramiro is gonna talk about LATAM, tap into the 300 billion in new sales in the fastest growing e-commerce market in Latin America. Mike is going to talk about the USA from A to Z, Amazon's US launch explained, and Sandra is going to go last because she has some issues with the presentation. She's going to talk about the H of Asia, mastering and scaling into China and Southeast Asia. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. We already have over 15 questions from people who cannot attend because of the time zone difference. So stay till the end. We're going to make it short, sweet, full of knowledge. So if you guys like it, like the winner, tell us. If you don't like it, just don't say anything. So let's start, guys. Dano, open it up, and we start from the east and we go to the west. So thanks for joining, everybody.
Yes, Mr. Nick, thank you so much for having me here. I cannot tell you guys how many connections Nick has made for me and our business. So he is a networking mastermind. Yeah, thanks again for having me here. I'm gonna kind of go very quickly through my slides about Amazon Japan. It would normally take a bit longer than 10 minutes, but I'll just do like a quick run through. So let's, who's talking? Yeah, I'm an e-commerce consultant and the founder of DefDevice, who has been an entrepreneur since 2000. I sold my private label business in 2019, and since then I'm helping other Amazon sellers and e-com brands to grow. The Japanese culture, I find it fascinating. I mean, we don't have to like go into every single facet of it, but the Japanese culture is so different from like what Western people are used to. So there's a lot of things which are not, it's good to just take note of those. Like, for example, this respect and etiquette. So they have a very strong emphasis on politeness, respect, and hierarchy. Then there's this group harmony thing, where Japanese people like value group harmony and have this emphasis on collective well-being over individual desires. Traditional arts and ceremonies are very strong. Then this concept of saving face, you know, where it's a critical part of Japanese culture, avoiding embarrassment, confrontation. That's also a very significant part. Then we have this appreciation for seasons, like there's this the cherry blossom season and other things which are also very dominant. And then last but not least, the anime. So even in the West, we are familiar with anime, which actually stems from the English word animation. So these are all like parts to be aware of, that how like Japanese people are slightly different set up in their culture. And then, of course, the most important part is the language itself. It took me a while to figure out that they actually have 4 different scripts. So there's this kanji, which is borrowed Chinese characters. Then we have hiragana, the native Japanese script, katakana, which is used to describe Western words. And then they actually also use English. So just imagine what this means for keyword research. Yeah. So if we just one word like Tokyo can be written in 3 completely different words. And if you just look at them, and if you don't speak Japanese, you would have no clue that these 3 words actually all mean the same thing. And there's a similar thing for keyword research. So we have to be like we have to pay a lot of attention to how words can be written in very different words, even though they mean something similar. Public holidays, again, a big difference in Japan and the US. So I remember the first time we wanted to start Christmas sales and realized there's no such thing as Christmas in Japan. So it's also something to take note of. This is just like the hierarchy of relevance of holidays in Japan and the US. Just a few numbers to just give you the big picture. So the population in Japan, 123 million. They have a serious disposable income. Less than 30% of Japanese people speak English. But the ethnic group in Japan, like 98% of Japanese people are actually Japanese, which like very different to the US, where surprisingly the Germans are the biggest ethnic group. I didn't know that. Average age is 49 years old. The largest city, Tokyo, is double the size of New York, and we have like 100 million users on Amazon, which makes it the 4th biggest marketplace, Amazon marketplace. Then in Japan itself, Amazon is actually the biggest e-com marketplace with almost 600 million visitors per month. Then we have Rakuten, Yahoo, and the other ones. Here again, compared to the US, where we have, again, Amazon as the first, but the rest of the list looks very different. Okay, so let's look at the opportunities. The obvious one, Amazon is the 4th biggest Amazon marketplace with 123 million people. We have a high GDP per capita, a strong economy, disposable income. We have a strong affinity to online shopping. So people don't have to be taught to buy online, which is like a global thing right now, I guess. And we have appreciation for Western goods. So when you have a brand that is established as a Western brand, so to say, it is actually an advantage, and people do appreciate these Western brands. Proximity to China. If you manufacture in China, shipping time and shipping cost will be a fraction compared to shipping time and cost to US or Europe. If you have a US listing or a European listing and you kind of start selling in Japan, you can actually carry over your existing reviews, which can be a huge advantage. So if you have an established listing on another marketplace and you use the same ASIN in Japan, you will actually see all your reviews showing up in Amazon Japan, which can give you like a huge head start compared to like having to start from scratch and 0 reviews. And of course, you can get ahead of your competitors. So if your competitors currently are not selling on Amazon Japan, maybe that's another reason to be the one who gets started first and gets a head start. Then, of course, we have some challenges. And I kind of love this little image here that I put together. It's just like putting together magazine covers of Japanese magazines, which gives us an impression like how different the media landscape looks in Japan. And this also kind of reflects on what we do in our listings. So there is this interesting discrepancy, like this conflict between the Zen thing and the minimalism. And on the other hand, we have this like really crowded media design landscape. So this is something which we should also reflect on when we create our listings. So the keyword research, obviously the language, we have to reflect on that. how we create our visuals, our infographics should be reflecting this Japanese essence as well. Then we have import regulations. So there are certain categories which are restricted, and we need to undergo lab tests in Japan in order to be able to import these goods. So, of course, on top of the list are food-related products, everything we can ingest, and then everything that touches food, like cutleries, even water bottles, need to be tested in labs before we can bring them in. Driving external traffic, which is kind of a no-brainer in Western countries, can be a bit of a challenge, because now you cannot simply use, your existing brand website or social media presence. You actually have to translate these things into Japanese as well, and this one can be a bit of a challenge as well. Other topics to consider is like trademark approval. So it's good to have your trademark approved in Japan with the Japanese authorities to get your brand registry. An importer of record is mandatory, so you need a third party who will actually import your goods. And then also something to think about are your packaging and inserts. So if your product needs instructions, and then you should consider to localize them as well. So the quick roadmap to get started would be first what I would do if I had an established brand right now in the West, and I would consider starting in Japan. I would first do my market research, identifying all the relevant keywords, checking sales volume, pricing, and review count in Japan, and see how this kind of compares to what I'm doing right now in the US, for example. Then, of course, we need to make sure that our products can be imported. So find out if we need to comply with any regulations. And then check if my trademark was available. So we can go to this platform called PlatPat and just check if you can register in our category for our trademark. And that would be when we kind of check all these three boxes, we are good to go. And then we can get started. We can find an importer of records. We can also use a 3PL partner, start creating our listings, send inventory, set up PPC campaigns, and start working on our off-Amazon presence. So yeah, that was the high-speed run-through through my Amazon Japan thingies. If you need some help and advice with it, you can simply scan this QR code or send an email to dano@defdevice.com. Thank you very much. I think the questions we do later, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Dano. You were quick as a sushi chef.
Yeah.
Precise. Okay, so you guys got your sushi, but I'm sure you're not full, because now we're gonna go where they eat the most, they consume the most, they're the biggest market. But of course, there is always a little piece of the pie that you can take if you know who to use for that. So Mike has been doing that. He's helped over 500 brands to take piece of the big pie, and he's gonna give you some tips on how you can do that. So Mike, let's go to America, man. Tell us more about you and what you guys are doing, and what brands should know about Amazon and the expansion there. Oh,
of course. I mean, there's so many different things we can cover about the US. It's obviously the largest market. There's a lot of different areas we can take this. But to give you a little background on myself, I'm the CEO of AMZ Advisors. Our company's been around since 2015, which makes us one of the oldest Amazon agencies out there. And as Nick said, we've worked with hundreds of brands on the Amazon platform, particularly in the US. And I've driven over $500 million in sales on the Amazon platform. And we're one of Amazon's advanced advertising partners, meaning that we are in the top 5% of advertisers on the platform. When it comes to selling in the US, as Nick said, it's the largest market, it's the most competitive. You need a different level of sophistication than you may need on other platforms. And that comes to the actual selling aspects of it. First steps first, you obviously need to get your product into the country, and that requires a variety of different steps. Luckily, doing business in the US is fairly easy. It's easy to open an LLC, easy to get a tax ID. Once you have opened up an LLC and have a tax ID, you're able to actually import the product into the country. You'll need an importer of record to bring the product into the country, as well as some other documents, including the bill of lading for the order you have, the commercial invoice, proof of the country of origin. And that's a very important aspect that a lot of people forget, as well as any other regulatory approvals that you're going to need from the different regulatory agencies in different categories. So, for example, for food, consumables like cosmetics, beauty products, all that's regulated by the FDA. So if your products do not meet FDA requirements, you're not going to be able to get them past the customs clearing process, and you're going to run into some issues there. As a foreigner, being able to import products into the US, you can do it as a foreign importer of record. However, to do that, you need to sign a power of attorney with your customs broker to bring the product in. And generally, when we're talking about all of the challenges that come on the customs and logistics side of bringing your products into the country, we always recommend working with a customs broker to handle a lot of these aspects. As I mentioned, some of the higher level things that you need to consider, some of the documents you'll need are the bill of lading, the commercial invoice. You'll need to know your HS code or HTS code in the US. That is how the common tariff schedule is set up. So with your HTS code, you can see what types of tariffs you'll actually be paying to bring into the country, to bring a product into the country. And then from there, you can kind of start dealing with the aspects of actually selling after you have the approvals and you've cleared customs and everything else. What we recommend is for foreigner sellers coming into the US marketplace for the first time is always to use the FBA platform. Fulfillment by Amazon is going to give you the visibility and the leg up that you need in the US that you might not necessarily need in other marketplaces. So for example, in some of the other marketplaces we work, such as Mexico, such as some of the European marketplaces, FBM works. So you can have an FBM product and still be able to do fulfillment for it, and customers will still purchase the product. In the US, there's a much higher importance placed on being an FBA product, having the Prime badge, and consumers look for that when they're actually shopping. They want to believe that the product's going to arrive fast, that it's going to arrive on time, that they're not going to have any issues. So that's one big aspect to consider about consumer purchase behavior in the US is on the Amazon platform. They want to see the Prime badge. Apart from doing the seller fulfilled Prime, which has a whole nother level of expense, we usually just recommend doing FBA as the most simple way to actually fulfill the customer orders. Now, when it comes to growing your sales on the platform, the first step is obviously SEO. You want to make sure that your listings are translated and set up with SEO for the local market in the US. That means, obviously, if you're coming from the UK, using American English versus British English, as well as making sure your translations are smooth from country to country. In the past, we've done a lot of work with Chinese sellers and other foreign sellers, and that's one area where they really struggle is the actual positioning of the products on the platform. I'm sure many US consumers have probably noticed it in the past where you're looking for a product, you go to a listing, and it's either keyword stuffed or the actual context and the grammatic aspects of the listing don't make sense. That has changed over time, but it's still a common error that we see from a lot of foreign sellers that don't have the level of English to write the listings in the correct way. So we highly recommend working with either someone who can write the listings for you in native English or working with a translation service that can make sure everything makes grammatical sense for the local marketplace. From there, we started talking about sophistication. I mentioned sophistication a little bit earlier. Amazon's not a platform anymore where you can just set up some auto campaigns and you're going to get sales. I mean, at least in the US, it works, but your costs are going to be variable. You're probably not going to get the results you want. You really need to start approaching it from how you're going to set up your sales funnel for your brand on the Amazon platform. And that sales funnel that you're building in the Amazon US is going to help you expand to other channels. It's also going to help you with your own D2C website if you're planning on launching one in the US as you expand your brand. And that, once you kind of consider it from that perspective, it makes it a lot easier to start setting up your marketing funnel and using Amazon for brand discovery and helping consumers learn about your brand and find it. You want to start with bottom level PPC, sponsored products, to try to convert people at the bottom of the funnel that are looking for a specific product. That's where you're going to start with advertising. As you move up the funnel into the consideration phase, you're going to start with category and product targeting. So people that are already looking for products similar to yours, making sure you're showing up on their product page and getting them back to your product listings. That's obviously a key aspect. And then once you move beyond that, you're looking at top of funnel advertising, which could be sponsored brands, it could be sponsored display, it could be DSP, could be off platform traffic through Google. That's one way that we drive traffic to Amazon. So when we're looking at all of these aspects, it takes a lot more work to manage the expansion aspects to the US. And I think where we see a lot of brands be unsuccessful in the expansion side is when they either don't have enough money to invest into the advertising complexity that you need on the US to be successful, or they don't invest in the right logistics partners. So this can lead to a lot of delays with getting products into the country. It can lead to tie-ups at customs. When you run out of inventory on the Amazon platform, at least in the US, it is that much more difficult to get going. So if you don't have the correct logistics sides tied down in your business when you're expanding to the US, you're going to eventually end up hurting your listings, because as you run out of inventory, as you're not able to advertise and not able to convert more consumers, you're going to lose ranking. And then you're starting pretty much from zero by trying to build all the advertising momentum up again. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands, to be in the US and to capture a little bit of market share, but it does take a little bit more investment. It takes a little bit more sophistication and definitely a lot more preparation on the back end with the logistics and the operations side. But there's more than enough opportunity. Like we said, we've worked with over 500 brands and getting them into the US. And if you are interested in learning more about getting to the US, you can feel free to reach out to us at amzadvisors.com or reach me directly at my email, mike@amzadvisors.com.
That was quick, Mike. I even didn't have time to unmute myself. So, but I think
I've given these speeches more than enough, Nick. I know exactly what the key points to hit are.
Yeah, exactly. But see, keep in mind now, that's how you can judge the speakers. They can tell you all you need to know as quickly as possible, because sometimes talk a lot and don't say anything. So just the most important things, what you're gonna miss out. So logistics, I mean, I've been running an e-commerce business in Europe. It was the biggest pain in the ass. So in the USA, it's even more important. How many Prime users are there? Like 150 million or even more in the USA?
I think it's even more. I don't remember the most recent number, but I think it was close to 200.
Okay. So this is more than half of the population, their own Prime. So no FBA, sayonara, baby, right, Dano?
I mean, in the US, if you want to be found, you have to be on Amazon. And if you want consumers to find your product, you have to be an FBA. You have to have that Prime badge or no one's going to find you. And that's the key thing to remember when you're expanding to the US.
Yeah, and one thing about the tax side, I mean, Amazon is taking care of the sales tax compliance. So I don't need to worry about that, which is a huge, huge relief. But now let's go to a more complicated market, which is very hot for vacation. Everybody goes there, Mykonos, Italy, Spain, but they don't want to go and invest there. One stat before Nick goes, only 2% of Amazon US sellers are selling pan-EU in Europe. That's crazy. 98% of your competitors are not selling here, but I'm going to have Nick to tell more about that. He's the head of at Amazon Advisory with Europe and APAC. He knows what it takes to expand here. So thanks for joining, Nick. Introduce yourself and tell us more about the expansion to Europe.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Nick. I'm the president of Europe, formerly president of Asia Pacific as well. But over the past year and a half, we've been really focusing on Europe. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. So at AMZ Advisors, we've been doing expansions for the past 5 or 6 years, more or less. And basically, we go into accounts and for sellers that have already expanded, and I see so many problems. So maybe we could just take a pause. We just talked about expanding to Japan. We talked about expanding to the US. A lot of these things are going to be overlapping, but as Nick mentioned, Europe in particular tends to have a lot of small complexities, I'll call them, that could sometimes slow down your expansion process. So what I've worked on for the past 18 months is developing a solution to just do expansions better before you even send your first unit to Europe. I have about 15 phone calls a week with people who want to go to Europe, and there's just so many strategies that aren't fully thought through. So what I want to do right now is kind of walk through all of the things that you might need to consider before you actually make a European expansion. So the first thing to note is that post-Brexit, Amazon EU, which encompasses the Amazon UK and the mainland EU, is still run by Amazon EU completely, which confuses some sellers. However, you really need to think about these two different marketplaces as being separate when it comes to logistics, importing, and even VAT numbers. You really need to look at these two separately. So these days, when we're talking about expansion to Europe, we talk about the EU5, which are the UK, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. However, we have a separate conversation about the UK because when it comes to warehousing, logistics, importing, you need to have two separate strategies, just to be clear about that. And that's a question I get a lot from sellers these days because it used to be a lot easier. So our first step normally when we're working with brands is your product going to be successful? A lot of expansions are done just thinking, hey, our product was doing pretty well in the US. We want to make more money. We want to expand to more marketplaces. So one of the first things we do is a pre-screening assessment. We actually assess all of the demand across Europe in these marketplaces to see if your product's going to be successful once you arrive there. There's nothing worse than spending 6 to 8 months planning an expansion, getting to Europe and realizing that you can't sell American coffee in Italy because Italian consumers just won't buy it. Or if you're selling snacks, for instance, and you try to go to the Italian market, they're really, really big on kitchen supplies and homeware, but not so much on actually buying consumables on Amazon yet, as people tend to go to the grocery store. And so one of the first things we do is we actually just do a review of your product, and we assess these markets and the demand for these markets to see if you're actually going to be successful. So if you come to me and you want to expand to Europe, I'm going to tell you before we even get to all the other steps if this is even a viable solution for you to generate more income and have a profitable endeavor. The next thing we do is we assess the demand from the EU5, the countries I mentioned before, and we're really trying to develop almost a pre-strategy and understanding what your roadmap looks like from 0 to 12 months later. So we actually forecast for you our predictions of how well the product will do with the best practices when it comes to SEO and advertising in all 5 of the big EU markets. Again, this is it's quite labor intensive, but in my opinion, I heard Dano mention it and Mike mentioned it as well. It's probably the most important thing, market research before you go, but even more important, forecasting, because we talk so much about market research, but if you can't actually put a number on what your ROI is going to be, it's extremely difficult to financially decide whether an expansion even makes sense for you. Even if your product sells, are you actually making money at the price points that European buyers are going to pay for your product? So the second step for us is actually forecasting sales and building what I'm going to call a pre-roadmap, which is understanding the niche markets that exist across the EU5 and what percentage of penetration you would need into these markets. Taking a quick look at the cost of ads and the PPC bids to understand if this is even something that's going to be profitable for you. The next step is partnerships. And Nick brought up partnerships about how they have over 1,000 partnerships. I would say for sellers that want to expand, I could count on my hand how many sellers we've worked with successful expansions that had all the necessary resources internally in their company. So we do something called a partnership audit, not to be confused with the software that Nick is talking about. This is merely conversations about what the internal resources of your brand look like and what we would need to co-op your expansion with. All of the most successful expansions to Europe involve partners. And so I've done my due diligence over the past year to develop a partnership network that allows us to seamlessly introduce you to people who can help you every step of the way. So some of these partners include VAT, which is an obvious one. You need to be VAT registered and have your VAT compliance just figured out and organized. Just recently, only 4 months ago, Amazon EU had a huge crackdown on VAT compliance and deactivated hundreds of accounts across Europe for foreign sellers that weren't VAT compliant. And so that's easily the most important thing to do. And sometimes, depending on the country you're applying for VAT in, it could take a little bit of time. So that's something that you definitely need to have good partners who know what they're doing to help you with. The second thing is who's going to import the product. As I mentioned, UK and mainland EU, unfortunately or fortunately, which I'll talk about later, you need to have separate importers of record in both of these places now. And that's one of the biggest solutions that I've been working on this past year, is to find really, really good partnerships that for people who can help you import your product without even filing for an LLC, which is called indirect representation, having a company that will help you basically bring the product in before it arrives at the Amazon warehouse. Third, warehouse partnerships. A lot of people have this idea that they're going to do FBA when they come to Europe. And I say, yes, FBA is the way to go. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't a need for 3PLs. I think Amazon warehouse space is becoming increasingly limited in the US, but eventually will be in Europe as well. So having strong partnerships with warehouses is something that we help you with. Another thing is a lot of really good expansions to Europe I see are from sellers who are drip feeding from a warehouse into the FBA center after doing a bigger import into the UK or into the EU. So meaning that you don't want to send a bunch of smaller shipments if you have to worry about importing the product into the UK and Europe every 4 months, just keep sending shipments. Some people prefer to do big pallet shipments, import everything at once to the country, find a 3PL partner, and then slowly drip feed inventory into the FBA centers. If that can get organized well, we've seen that to be a really fantastic setup, and maybe you have some less worries about sending new stock and having to go through the entire process again of sending it and importing the product. And so there's a handful of partnerships. We actually have a long list of needs. The other one that comes to mind though is compliance. Japan, is very strict and has some lab testing for particular products. The US is a little bit looser and has the FDA. Europe is somewhere in the middle. And this is where there's probably the most confusion from sellers I speak with about whether they're going to be what the compliance regulations are for the products they sell. And I wish I could say that there's an easy answer to this, but in Europe, every country has slight variations of how they approach compliance as well. So one of the things that we try to do really early on is determine what your target home base country is going to be in mainland EU using pan-European FBA. And making sure that the products are compliant in that marketplace, and connecting you with partners who could really help you make sure that from labeling, how you're packaging the product, and anything else you need to know before you actually send those products to the country and an FBA center. And so partnerships, it's a big part of it. We actually spent 3 weeks just figuring out all the resources you're going to need to have a successful expansion. Now, later in the webinar, I'll talk about why I think this is a good thing. Like Nick said, the percentage is actually kind of mind-boggling when you think about it, that there's only 2% of, there's only 2% of US FBA sellers selling on pan-European EU in Europe.
Exactly. That's the case.
And one of the things we've noticed is when we get this right, once we get to Europe, once we get by the barrier to entry, the opportunity is great. It's not as competitive a market because so many people look at Europe and they're like, they probably listen to all the things I just said and they're like, maybe next year, and they wait. And so coming back to why we're doing this, we basically want to make a blueprint as easy as possible for you guys. So before you even expand abroad, You actually know exactly what it looks like, how much of an ROI you can potentially get, all of the partnerships that you'll need before you send your first unit to Europe. And lastly, we develop a full strategy of what the first 6 months looks like in that marketplace, including PPC strategies, SEO strategies, and how to approach optimization and advertising across Europe when you have one European home marketplace. So that, I don't know if I was as quick as Mike was, but yeah, that's pretty much how we're thinking about expansions to Europe.
Yeah, you guys are superstars today. You're the fastest and the shortest to the point speakers I've ever had. I'm just gonna ask a few things for Europe, which might be a good news for Mike, for Nick, but actually we won something with HelloTax and one partner, which is called end-to-end entry to Europe, which means that we do the market entry and the agency takes over, So all the guys issues that we have, we can do it, like I said, separately with the partners, because I know everybody, but we build a package where the brand only talks with one company, which does the compliance, tax, import, translations, and then you guys take over. But we're gonna talk with Mike for that after the event. And usually because everybody's asking for the price, just to make it simple, we even have the pricing for that. It's like 10K for SKU to expand in Europe. And this is not only for Amazon, but it's omnichannel. So that's like the average investment, which we have. That one thing that Nick mentioned about VAT, it takes 3 to 4 months to get the VAT. One thing that a lot of sellers don't know is US companies have huge advantage. In Germany, which is the main market that is the go-to market for everybody, they have specific tax authority which deals with US application only. So for example, if you're a UK company, you're gonna get the VAT slower than a US company. There is no need of translations in Germany. There is no fiscal representation, which is an extra fee that you pay on top of the VAT in Europe. And one thing, just to summarize now, product compliance is even more important than VAT because sometimes it takes longer in Europe, like France, Germany. So, but that's why we will build the package, because if you tell a brand, okay, I have the solutions, let me connect you with all these partners. Like Nick said, people don't want to talk to everybody, We have a saying for that in Bulgaria. Too many grandmothers, skinny baby. So don't send the brand to too many grandmothers. Send them to one granny who is fed, Gordo, Ramiro. She's gonna tell him all he needs to know, and they can expand Europe. But this is a topic for another webinar. And Mike, I'm gonna tell Mike how it works. So if you like what Mike and Nick are talking about, they're an expert, so get in touch with them and they can help expand. But now we're gonna go to the Signoritas and Margaritas, as one of my employees saying, he always goes to Spain, South America for vacation, and that's all in his mind, Signoritas and Margaritas. But there is a lot of stuff there that you don't know. This is probably the market with the biggest potential of all, because nobody is talking about it. That's why we have Ramiro from GoAvance. He's gonna tell you more about the market and what you don't know and what you should know, because you should definitely consider that. So, hello, Ramiro. Tell us more about you and what you guys are doing down there, besides the partying.
Besides the partying, then not much. I guess that's it. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Nick. I want to start off by just saying, it's really interesting how Dana, Nick, and myself have such similar experiences with expansion. And I think this is always going to be the underlying theme of expansion is, first of all, when you're talking globally, you're talking about you're selling the market itself, right? For a lot of these, I think Nick landed on it very, very truthfully, which is, maybe next year, seems to be the general response that we often get when speaking internationally, right? So I think this is fundamentally the wrong approach. I think anyone that's listening into this conversation is realizing that there are ways to get into markets, and that the markets can be very lucrative, based basically just on lack of competition, being first mover advantage, like all these things, right? For Latin America specifically, I want to go a little bit first into the history, right? Where for the longest time, and I think we'll all agree here, for the longest time, Latin America was seen as an unviable market. From everything from, look, I don't know how to do it, to, purchasing power to, there's a whole host of reasons why many sellers aren't looking or weren't looking at Latin America for the past, 10 odd years, right, of e-commerce. For me personally, I'm Mexican, born and raised. I live abroad, most of my life, and I come back in 2017. And I realized that there's the online shopping behavior quite isn't there, right? I still got to witness in 2017 distrust for the e-commerce systems, right? So everything from, is it a scam, to does it actually get to your house, to how do you make the payment? And this is purely because culturally we hadn't been focused on, right? Like Jeff Bezos hadn't turned his sights down to Mexico and Latin America, and it wasn't the big focus. So what we ended up with is a secondary market called Mercado Libre, which I don't want to call it a secondary market. It is a stronger market in Latin America than Amazon, but it is very homegrown, right? These the three founders of Mercado Libre look at Latin America and go, hey, there's a huge opportunity here. We're going to do per country markets, right? And start that way. So they've been around for quite a while now, and to this day still hold more percentage of the market than Amazon does. And now Amazon is looking down at Mexico or looking down at Latin America and going, all right, now we're going to make the push. So what we're seeing is this huge focus of expanding e-commerce. And as a consequence of that, what we end up with is a growing consumer base, but not because there's suddenly more people, but because these people are being digitized in their shopping behaviors, which makes it incredibly lucrative because it's that much easier. It's always easier to get the piece of the pie when the pie is growing, right? Like the worst thing, the last thing you want to do is to be fighting over a pie that's shrinking, right? And then you add to this sort of a bolstering of Latin American economies where you're seeing, you're seeing Latin American currencies all rally against the dollar and get really strong. And you're seeing more national investment kind of across the board, right? And bolstering middle classes and things like remote work, sending dollars into these countries, right? And things like nearshoring after pandemic, really putting a focus light in Latin America, on Latin America, about this is the place to be, right? So what we're seeing now, after essentially a decade of being a minor market, we're starting to see this growing hunger by brands to be like, I need to be in Latin America. And it makes complete sense because what we're seeing is the Latin American consumer is often paying way more for the same product because you have resellers, drop shippers, any kind of, middleman that's making just a bad shopping experience for consumers. And brands that are expanding natively to Latin American e-commerce are suddenly seeing that much more of that much less of competition. We're talking about of 20% of the PPC that you would normally spend in the US, right? And this, I'm sure, is very similar to the experiences in Japan, to the experiences in Europe, right? Where what you're seeing is, hey, this is actually a really viable project for us to carry out. And then you run into the brick walls, which is where things get complicated. And everyone on this call has in the same sort of overarching issues, which is, hey, you need an IOR. You need to make sure you have a good logistics partnership. You need to make the difference for Latin America, and in my personal experience, more strongly in Mexico, is different cultures of bureaucracy, different cultures of setup, and less systems set up for international sellers to be comfortably selling within the territory, right? So what we're seeing is, hey, you can just send to FBA, and then you click send to FBA, and the very next step goes, cool, what's your tax ID? Your Mexican tax ID. And you go, I don't have one. It's like, no, of course you don't, because this isn't set up in such a way to make it easy for you, right? We've spoken to people that are like, hey, I was selling in Mexico. I just faked it and said I had a Mexican tax ID and a Mexican address. I just got hit with a yearly tax bill. What do I do? And it's like, well, you go back in time and you undo that bad choice, right? So by and large, Mexico and Latin America have become these very lucrative markets where you absolutely want to be in, especially as a smaller to medium brand where you don't have the budget to, go into the US market and drop, $500,000 on ads to get to the front page or whatever. These are very viable. This is a very viable alternative. All right. What are you going to need though? You're going to need, if you want to do it locally, you're going to run into bureaucracy. You're going to need a business entity. You're going to need to be declaring monthly taxes, which is just I go into the government website. This is an absolute nightmare. You have to find a local partner. You have to find a local representative, and it'll take you a couple of months to just get the business entity going. Then you got to make sure your product complies. And I don't want to make it sound like this is just too hard. I just want to make sure that anyone's listening to this, there are going to be probably some additional challenges to what you would normally expect. For Europe, you can get a company to do your VAT. In Mexico, you need your own company to do it, like that sort of things. You got to make sure your product complies, and not only that it is legal to sell, but also that it is properly labeled in the local language. And it includes like your importer on record and so on and so on. And once you have that, like the product compliance, depending on the product, can take up to 12 months. It can be anywhere from 30 days to 12 months, depending on what you're selling and what you're doing. And then you get into your usual logistical challenges, right? Like who's your IOR? How are you shipping? What's your tariff percentage? Well, where did the product come from? All right, we got to make sure we're documenting all of this. Do I have my HS code? Great. Like that just made my life a little bit easier. But there's still, there's still all these are all the challenges to just get it into the country. And now you have it in the country, and it's like, okay, first of all, I have 2 marketplaces to take care of, right? Because I'm not just going to be on Amazon. I need Amazon and Mercado Libre and potentially things like Walmart, right? And Coppel and Liverpool, like local marketplaces. Now you're asking yourself, how do I fulfill all of these orders? That's a completely fair question. Trust me, yes. Now, Mexican, by Mexican regulations, you need to provide customer service. And even within, Amazon, you get an Amazon message, you get it in Spanish. All right, well, you need a customer service representative that speaks Spanish, right? And now you have, great, you did all of this. You have all of your setup. Now let's reach the customer. Well, guess what? Consumer shopping behavior is a little bit different as well. Your average consumer is not going and typing a generic keyword into Amazon unless it's a very generic product. So if you have a little bit of a more nuanced brand, maybe you have a more niche product, you are much better off trying to do your TikToks, do your Instagram, do your Facebooks, do your off-platform marketing to bring them into the product, right? So you need to understand the shopping behaviors, because ultimately we're on our way there. But as I mentioned earlier, we are a 666 million people slowly moving into the e-commerce market, right? But these are 666 million people you want to reach. All right. So this all sounds like a nightmare. Why would I actually do this? I mean, that has to be your next question, right? Like, why would I ever try to get into Mexico, into Latin America, if this is, when I'm importing to Brazil, I'm going to get hit with 40% taxes. You want to do it because once you find the logistical solutions, and once you have all these problems down pat, what you will see is a market that's growing 30% year over year. It is a market that can be an instant 10% bump to your total sales, like without even thinking about it, right? And it is a market, like I said, where the pie is growing, and the game of acquiring a brand new consumer is much easier than acquiring a consumer that already has brand loyalty to another product, right? On top of that, just looking at the macro sort of stance of these platforms, what you'll see is essentially where Amazon was in 2016 or 2017. And anyone that's a seller on Amazon right now, Amazon US, what they'll say is, I would do anything to have started my brand in 2016 and be on Amazon, right? Because ultimately, who amongst us doesn't want to be the person that owns the listing for the 18,000 review garlic crusher, right? That everyone's seen when learning e-commerce. And that's what what the market really has the potential for new sellers, for experienced sellers from abroad to be selling their products in a place where they can get the organic ranking and grow with the market, right? That's why I'm so passionate about this market. A, because I'm here and I want access to all the brands that I see on TikTok and I can't buy yet. But B, because we are really going to be seeing this growth year over year, over year, over year. Anyone that's looking at Latin America, that's looking at Japan, that's looking at Europe as a directly, how do I get in and make money within the next 2 months? I think you're looking at it wrong. I mean, you are going to be making money within the next 2 months, but the question is, what is the game plan? What am I going to be making 8 years from now? Right. And I think that's where, I mean, I'll leave it at that. Like, you need to be in here.
Hey, Ramiro, thanks for that. So, like Ramiro said, no, I wish I started 9 years ago. So I'll just give you some information now. When I started e-commerce, I was selling acai berry in Europe. That was 13 years ago. Acai berry was the magic Brazilian fruit. Nobody was selling that in Europe. I was paying 1 cent per click in some countries. So consider that LATAM, of course, you cannot buy, I mean, probably you might have countries that you can do that, but if you're the first one, it doesn't mean that it's a bad market. People usually play it safe. I mean, that's why a lot of companies don't go from the States to Europe, because it's hard. Why should they go there? I mean, USA is a big market. But usually the guys who are the trailblazers, they make the most money because everybody cares about the profit, not about the revenue and all this kind of stuff. But now we're going to go to Sandra, which is the last but not the least, and we're going to talk for a market that we've never covered. We're accustomed to having Asian companies going to the USA and Europe, but we've never covered the Southeast Asia market. So Sandra, thanks for joining and replacing Ryan. Introduce yourself and tell us more about what you guys do and what we don't know about Asia and the e-commerce there.
All right, thank you so much. Can you hear me, first of all? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear it. We can see the presentation.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for inviting Redfern to join this webinar today. So just a little bit about us. We're a leading independent brand management agency, and we work with brands across Southeast Asia. So we're responsible for the growth, direction, and performance of the brands. And then today I will be speaking a little bit about the age of Asia. So specifically China and Southeast Asia, and then how to grow your brand and how to grow your sales in these countries. So just before I go to the next slide, so Southeast Asia and China, they've essentially emerged as these exciting export markets for foreign brands who are wanting to come into this region over the past couple of years because of growth in the increase in urbanization, the emergence of a middle class, and the increase in use of digital technologies, and just the increased widespread usage of mobile phones and of increased penetration of the internet across these areas. So until recently, it could be said that Southeast Asia was almost overshadowed by China just because China was growing so rapidly. But nowadays, China has reached a point where it's still growing, of course, but there's so many brands that are coming into the market and becoming slightly saturated in that. Southeast Asia has become a much more appealing prospect for a lot of brands, just because of the fact that China has become so overly saturated in that. My screen just stopped. 1 second, sorry. So just a little bit about these few different countries. So in a report from Google and Bain and Company stated that as many as 40 million people in Singapore, across Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand became new internet users in 2022 after the outbreak of COVID-19. So you can just see kind of that boost in the number of internet users since over the past, especially the past 2-3 years. And then the region's projected 2022 e-commerce sales growth was at about 20.6, which is the highest in the world. And then this means
Guys, can you hear Sandra?
No, I can't.
Yeah, Sandra, if you can hear us now, if you want, you can try to log out and log in.
I lived in China for 7 years. Zoom is not always very simple there, I think.
Yeah, I think Sandra is in Hong Kong, or
I think she said Shanghai. I think she said
Shanghai, yeah, she said Shanghai.
Okay, so yeah, I spoke with Ryan. Ryan was in Hong Kong. So guys, we can talk about some other stuff until we're waiting for Sandra. So, what have you seen recently? Do you see like demand in people who want to go outside of their home country market, or more people are actually playing it safe?
I mean, I could start with that because this year, this year has been sort of a tough year for businesses, especially in the US, in terms of the economy and interest rates. And what's strange is I expected to have a huge downturn in like how many people want to expand, but it's been the exact opposite. I think because these years haven't been doubling sales year over year again, they're all looking now to other marketplaces and are more open to different marketplaces to, I guess, compensate for not that e-commerce is getting smaller, but maybe sales, the growth this year hasn't been quite what it has been, at least in the US in years before this. So yeah, seen a huge demand to go to Europe.
Okay, and where usually do they give up? I mean, when you talk with them, what is the piece of like what are the blockers which make them give up? Is it taxes, compliance, or just the whole combination of things that, or the time that it takes them to?
Well, I wouldn't say they're giving up. What I'd say is that acquiring the necessary VAT, like just getting the VAT number in the country they're deciding to, just means they have to. I mean, it's just whenever a bureaucratic process starts, things slow down, and so I think for a lot of people, it's just about, wow, I didn't realize I'd have to start doing this now to be able to sell in Q4, for instance. So yeah, I'd say that the stumbling block tends to be about maybe because some people are so gung-ho on expansion and they're like, yeah, it might take 4 months to get this number. And they're like, well, by the time that happens, who knows how they're feeling. So.
Exactly. So guys, we're doing the webinar now in September. So if you want to start selling in Europe in Q1, now you should get started now. You would need to get your product compliance check, get your VAT. Then once you start the application for the VAT, you need to wait. I need to actually arrange your custom and logistics in Europe, and probably a month before before you actually get the VAT, which you would never know for sure. You can actually do the localization translation, but before you start all of that, like Nick said, research, and like I said, don't just research for the sake of it, but see exactly if there is an appetite for what you're selling. So you cannot sell olive oil in Greece, for example, or like coffee in Italy. Okay, guys, actually, we're gonna wait a little longer for Sandra, and I recommend that we start with the Q&A session because she's not replying to me. I have no idea. So let's start with the question. If she joins, we're gonna resume her session. But let's start with the questions here. So the first one that I have here is from Harper Scott, and that's for Dano, because there is something for Japan. So the question is, how to know if my brand is ready for Amazon Japan?
I would say the first answer to this question is most likely yes, it is. But of course, to have a more detailed response, we would need to check what is happening with your brand products in the marketplace. Who are your competitors? How are they selling? So there is a level of research to be done to kind of give a complete answer to that. But most of the time, what we see is that there's a lot of potential for brands. And most of the time, the answer is yes, you should be selling in Japan.
Yeah, by the way, something to add, because we've had a lot of discussions, which is the second biggest marketplace after Amazon.com. And usually Japan is the one that I've been told is the second one. Oh,
second.
Yeah, that's what I know. I mean, I thought that it's Germany, but I've been told several times from several guys that it's actually Japan. So Japan is the second biggest market on Amazon.
There we go. Well, that's an
Yeah,
important update. For my info, it was the fourth biggest, but even better if it's the second biggest.
Yeah, by the way, I've seen it twice, taken in a lot of like sources. So, and actually, we have another question from Sardar Payzan. Is there any tool out there that can tell keyword sales per month or day in all Amazon marketplaces, EU, UK, Australia, Japan, Canada? Anybody who knows the answer?
Helium 10 does cover Japan, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say Helium 10 also covers Latin America for the most part.
Okay. So that's her question. We have another question at the beginning from Nick Vanaken. Hi, I'm an European citizen and I like to sell in Germany, but like to comply with the VAT. How do I handle this? Actually, I asked the question to Nick. If you're still here, I need to know which your home country to answer your question, because judging by your last name, Vakanen, it sounds Finnish. If you're based in Finland and if you have a company and a VAT there, you can fulfill orders to clients across the European Union from Finland. And you can deliver from Finland to Germany. You don't need to do anything but the VAT in Finland. And when you hit 10,000K, you need to opt in for OSS. But if you want to hold stock in Germany, then you would need to get VAT in Germany. And for European companies, it's going to take like 2 to 3 months. You can get in touch with Hello Tax and we can help with that. Just give me a second. Somebody mentioned just if it's Sandra. Okay, it's not Sandra. Okay, so we go to the other questions from the people who are not able to attend. So the next question is for, okay, I think this is for Mike, for Emir Kaya. How big is the US marketplace compared to other marketplaces? I think you covered that, but it's good to answer that, Mike. So how big is the US marketplace compared to other Amazon marketplace?
I mean, the US marketplace is massive compared to all the other Amazon marketplaces that are out there. I think the best way to phrase this is that if you're considering getting into the US, when you look at broader categories in some markets, like some of the European marketplaces, for example, give you a rough idea. I don't know, let's say baby products. The entire baby product category in Germany or in France or in Italy might be smaller than a sub niche of the baby category in the US. So for example, let's say you're selling, baby products in Germany, baby clothing in the US might be bigger than the entire baby product category in Germany. So there's no way to give you a specific number on how much bigger it is, but the US marketplace dwarfs everything else when it comes to the e-commerce sales. So if you have more specific examples of where you're looking to go, or to get a better idea of what the sales looks like or the sales opportunity looks like for the type of products you have, we're always glad to discuss those with you. But in general, the US marketplace is significantly bigger than any other marketplace out there.
Okay, Emma, you can actually get in touch with Mike. They can do the research and they can tell you what is the opportunity in each market. So we have another question from Nick Vanaken. He has like an explanation. I have a Belgian VAT, but I would like to sell in Germany. I applied for the European number to comply with regulations. Do I need to apply for additional compliance? Currently, I'm selling still fulfilled. But how about the threshold? If I sell more than 100K, then Amazon tells me to get German VAT. Does this apply? Already have an OSS VAT number. So if you hold your stock in Belgium, once you reach 100K per year, you can opt in to register for OSS. And when you do that, you don't need to get VAT in Germany, as long as you hold your stock in Belgium. So you can fulfill your orders from Amazon Belgium to clients not only in Germany but across the whole European Union. Just one VAT in Belgium, one OSS. And if you want to hold stock in other FBA facilities across Europe, you must have VAT in each country where you store goods. But if you're doing what you just explained, just Belgium, you just need one VAT and one OSS, but only when you hit 10,000K. That's it. We have we have a few more questions. Okay, Sardar, you have a very long question, so I'm gonna have my advice is actually get in touch with Mike. Mike, any answers are there in the chat, so he can get in touch with you guys, and because it's a very long question, so we cannot answer that.
Yeah, I'm just reading it. I'm just reading it right now. I'm going through all of it.
Yeah,
So Don, if you want to reach out to me directly, it's mike@amzadvisors.com, and we can talk more specifically about your question.
Okay, we have another question. This one is I think it's for Ramiro from Natasha Ivanova. What are the main difficulties for small, medium brands when expanding to LATAM?
Oh, that's a great question. For small to medium brands in general, what we see is sometimes there's inventory issues, sure. But in general, bureaucracy. When we looked at making our business, the whole idea was this is an absolute nightmare to go through. So what if we just already did it? Why don't we take care of things? Because if you're a small to medium business and you're not based in Mexico, every step of the bureaucracy will be a nightmare. Trying to get your tax ID, trying to get your business entity created, without having some boots on the ground, some local representation, makes it incredibly difficult. Everything like suddenly the lawyer didn't reply to you, and now, well, I'm on the other side of the country. Like, what am I doing? Well, you see, we're here. When we ran into it, we walked over to we drove over to the lawyer's office, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, we're waiting." So in general, the remoteness will be very tough. The bureaucracy will be very tough. The importing, like import on record, figuring out tariffs, figuring out product compliance will be very tough. But what I would say is the absolute number one is just the opportunity cost of all the time investment that you need if you're trying to do everything in-house, right? So we've spoken to several brands where they say, like, we want to be in Mexico. We want to be in Latin America selling. But this requires hands and manpower and just hours that we don't have. And that's where I think we can help there. It's let's skip the wait time, but let's skip all the work that you're going to have to do. It's just, small to medium businesses don't just have extra manpower lying around to take care of a whole new market. So that I think would be my response.
Yeah, thanks, Ramiro. Actually, this is a good question and this applies not only for small and medium brands, because I've spoken with few 100+ million brands recently. Their teams, I had a meeting with the founder, the CEO, and 500 guys. Nobody had a clue about Europe. So and that's why I know you need company like ours. And just to let you know for something, this is for Europe, but I'm sure it's the same in other markets. You can do everything yourself. You can get your own tax number. You can do all the stuff yourself, but you lack the knowledge, and you're gonna spend more time, which means money, if you do it yourself. That's why you're paying company like ours. And most of the time, a lot of those companies, like the one package that we did, we cover the cost. We don't make money. We make money only if you make money. So if you don't expand, and so just to make it simple, time is the more precious asset of those. But let's go to the next question, because we have probably 10 more. The next one is from Diego Fernandez for Europe. Okay, what are some optimizing strategies for selling in different European marketplaces? That's for you, Nick.
All right, and yeah, thanks for that question. So for optimizing in Europe, actually, maybe let me just take a second to go off of what Nick just said as well. A lot of the sellers I talked to had tried to do it by themselves for a year unsuccessfully, and then they contact us. So in terms of losing time, it could be easily a year or more if you try to do all this yourself and get bogged down by all the things you don't know. So now, on that same note, in terms of optimizing for Europe, we've worked with a lot of accounts where the expansions were done on their own by the seller, and then we go help them grow in Europe afterwards. And I've seen some crazy inventory setups when it comes to Europe, some approaches that just aren't right. So in terms of optimization, here's what I would say. focus on your home market first. Focus on the market that your inventory is in. I spoke to a seller 2 weeks ago that had all of their listings translated into 17 languages and spent probably around 15,000 US dollars before they even sold a unit in the US. I'm sorry, in Europe. So in terms of optimization, what we recommend is one, knowing what your strategy is going to be. Are you using the European Fulfillment Network? Are you using Pan-European FBA? Identifying where the markets are that you're going to actually store your goods and focusing optimization there. The Amazon Translate function is actually pretty good. And until you're getting a couple €1,000 in sales a month, maybe 1,000 if you want to be more conservative. The Amazon Translate function works until you hit a certain threshold of a couple thousand a month in a certain marketplace. Then we recommend you start looking at that marketplace and optimizing as you go. I think another reason that I suggest doing this is because when you start to get to the €1,000 to €1,000 to €5,000 a month threshold, the data you have on who's buying your product in that target marketplace is a lot more helpful for optimizing your listings. And so generally speaking, focus on your home country's market, get those optimized and move on to the second highest selling markets over time. And don't have all of your listings translated in 17 languages. I hope I'm not messing up business for any translation companies out there. There are some really good ones, but yeah, that's generally speaking my advice for optimizing. And in addition to that, infographics, same thing. Having all your infographics, if you can do it and you have the means to do it, be my guest. But we found that it leads to a lot more confusion, especially in the back end. If certain languages are showing up in the wrong marketplace, which happens if you don't know exactly how to do this correctly.
Okay, thanks, Nick. One question from Nick Vanaken. In case I sell over 100K, where do I need to go for help? Is this something help tax can help? Yes. Just the one thing is not 100,000. It's like 10,000K is a threshold for ours. And yes, help tax can help out. You can email me and I'm going to connect with the team for that. My email is np like Nick Penev @hellotax.com. But you're going to get the recording tomorrow with the giveaways, and you can actually request one of the giveaways for free VAT. Another question from Sardar: is there any website in the USA like Alibaba where we can contact manufacturers' products to sell on Amazon? Mike, Ramiro?
Sounds like he's asking about like a wholesale directory. I can't think of anything off the top of my mind. I don't really look at wholesale directories. But there's various different ways to get the contact information for different brands that are manufacturing outside the US. One way would be looking at import records to see what brands are bringing what products in from what countries. You can see by categories in a lot of different ways that way. But I personally don't know a wholesale directory because I don't use one. So I can't really provide much value on that.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Hey, Sandra, no worries. No, it's all good on our end. Do you want to continue?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. This is the first time we've done it like that. We've done the Q&A, and then we're gonna finish the webinar. But no worries. I told you there is nothing certain in my webinars. But speakers need to show up. They can disappear. They can come back again. Doesn't matter. Value is value. We're gonna cut the webinar. You can watch each part separately. So Sandra, you were talking about the HF Asia. So please continue. Did you froze again? Amen. No worries, guys. Technology. Okay, no wholesale for private label. Yeah, I guess I already know. We cannot help out. Send me an email, and I'm gonna connect with the partner who is sourcing agent, and he knows a lot of people in the sourcing industry. He's gonna be able to answer your question. Let's continue with the Q&A just to see if Sandra is gonna come back again. Let me see another question. This is for Mike. Okay, from Rossi, from Luca Rossi. Okay, what are the legal and fiscal challenges that brands have expanding to the USA?
Well, I mean, fortunately, the legal challenges are a lot more simplified than in some other countries that you've heard. I think Ramiro and Dano and Nick mentioned, and Nick Penev as well. It's easy to set up a business in the US. You can set up an LLC in pretty much a week. You can get a tax ID in pretty much a week. So you can get your business up and running. That is generally the easy part. The part that gets more challenging is when you start looking at some of the tax challenges, especially as a foreign seller. One of the things that really doesn't make sense in the US, and it doesn't make a ton of sense to Americans either, is the sales tax system. Luckily, when you're selling through Amazon, I think every state except Missouri now at this point has the marketplace of facilitator tax or facilitator laws in place. So Amazon is collecting and remitting the sales tax on your behalf to the states that you're selling in or the states that you have a nexus in. When you're defining, when you look outside of Amazon and when you're selling outside of Amazon, or even when you're looking at some of these states that have market facilitator laws, you need to determine whether you still need to be registered as a tax, registered for a sales tax permit in those states. And that's where it gets really tricky. And to preface this, I always recommend talking with an accountant about what you need to do. But for example, if you have a nexus, which is typically determined as having inventory, having employees, having your home office located in a state, that creates a nexus, meaning that you need to be registered. If you're doing a certain volume in sales in certain states, you may need to be registered on top of the marketplace of facilitator taxes. And if you're selling on other platforms outside of Amazon that are like your own D2C website, for example, and you have inventory at Amazon, that would trigger a nexus for you as well. So the sales tax side gets really complicated. That's where most foreign brands struggle, because it's not like that where it's included in the product price or it's automatically assumed. Sales tax is different by state, it's different by nexus, and it gets extremely complicated. And I really recommend talking to an accountant about how to deal with that.
Yeah, actually, one of my clients actually doing sales tax compliance, and I think there is 11,000 jurisdictions in the USA. So Europe is piece of cake, but this is why Mike said go to Amazon. Amazon is going to cover the VAT part. This takes something that we didn't mention earlier, but in Europe, when you're a non-EU company and you sell in Europe, besides getting the VAT, Amazon is going to collect and pay the VAT to the tax authority. So your only obligation is to get the VAT and then file the reporting, which is done by HelloTax. HelloTax connects with the Amazon account, it pulls the data, we file the report. You don't need to bother paying any returns if you're a non-EU company. Amazon is going to do that because they're the so-called deemed supplier. So Europe is following the steps of US with Amazon to make it easier, but of course, no, it's not as easy as the USA. So Sandra, she has connection, so okay, she's coming with, probably we're going to do the recording with her and we're going to publish it eventually. So, okay, so probably she's going to do the recording and we can share that tomorrow in the follow-up. So we have another question. This one is for Ramiro, Ava, Luis. What is the leading LATAM what is leading South America's e-commerce growth? What is the reason for that? I guess that's her question.
I love these questions. Strap in. Across LATAM, we're seeing a certain economic boom. I would say we're seeing just very nice results across the board. It started pretty much in the handling of the pandemic. My specialty is keeping up with Mexican trends. And in Mexico, we've seen just a strengthening of a middle class. We've seen 9 million people lifted out of poverty was the latest report that came out. We're seeing a ton of nearshoring opportunities. Obviously, everyone you had like every port backed up on the west coast of the US, and everyone sort of said, hey, there's a land border right here where we could probably manufacture things. So nearshoring is taking off really just massively. And to add to that, we have the globalization of work, right, with remote work. So we're seeing every day more and more nationals across the world, like, be it, well, anywhere in the world, suddenly making money in dollars and having access to American prices. So all these steps, a ton more. Like here in Mexico, we just got the Tesla Gigafactory, like set to be opened in Monterrey, and all these things. What we're seeing is suddenly the purchasing power of the middle class is expanding. On the other hand, the digitization of payments has also taken off very strongly. Even recently here in Mexico, your corner shops wouldn't carry a card reader. They're like, no, cash only. There was this general feeling of distrust, and it makes sense, but this feeling of distrust over the past, however many years, 30 years, where people started doing everything by card, it didn't really take off as strong. So we have companies like Mercado Libre helping that transition. I mean, understanding the big picture and playing bank, right? And coming up with Mercado Pago solutions or payment from your phone solutions, or even I can now order on Amazon and go to the corner shop and pay for it there at an OXXO, right? So the payment solutions came along at the same time as the spending habits came in, at the same time as, like everyone was saying, you're suddenly not seeing the same growth that you expected, that you projected in the US. Okay, where can I send this added inventory? So it's almost like a perfect storm of everything sort of going right for this boom that we're seeing, right? Where we trust the platform more. It is now easier for more people to pay for the things. And on average, there's a little more money in everyone's pockets that they're trying to spend. And then obviously we see all of the goods and brands and products on TikTok every single afternoon, when that's all we're doing is laying on TikTok and watching TikToks, right? And this need or this demand for these brands came about. I just noticed I'm clipping. Am I too loud? This demand for the brands came about, and we're seeing the results of it.
Thanks, Ramiro. We have a few more questions and we're done. One is for Nick, actually for Mike, I guess, from Jennifer Pearson. To clarify, AMZ advisors will only work with sellers that meet certain criteria to expand into other countries.
I mean, yes. Yeah, the short answer is yes. The long answer is a little bit more complicated than that. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're working with brands that have the resources to invest into the actual expansion. I mean, we help with everything, from having the right partners, like Nick mentioned, to help them through the process with everything and making sure they're getting set up in the marketplaces correctly. But at the same time, you do need to meet a lot of the qualifications we have, which are around, like I said, having the resources, being serious about investing in it. We don't want to start going down this process with someone who's not taking the expansion seriously. But if you're interested in expanding, we're always glad to talk about it.
Okay, Jennifer, I'm going to type Mike's email here so you can get in touch with him after the webinar. We have giveaways for everybody. So besides the knowledge, of course, knowledge without some cash is nothing, right, guys? Cash is king and knowledge is the queen. So we have two questions. So from Nick Vanaken. Okay, I also sell products on eBay, Amazon, Bo, and my web. Okay. If you don't have OSS, yes, you will be in trouble, because after you reach 10,000 K, and if you're selling outside of Belgium, you should be on OSS. But like I said, let me type you my email. Get in touch with me, and I'm gonna schedule a consultation with our sales guys so they can check exactly what you have been doing. But don't worry about that. There is something which is called backdating. So even if you have not been paying the proper taxes, we can go back and do that. So you're not gonna go and get in trouble. We just need to cover what you should have been done already. Jennifer, expansion from US into the EU. Yes, I mean that's what Nick is doing. I shared Mike's email so I can get in touch with them and they can help you out. We also have another partner which Mike knows, but he doesn't know what we've cooked in the meantime. We have end-to-end entry solution for Europe, which means that we set up everything like taxes, Hello Taxes providing the technology and the compliance. We have the product compliance, logistic customs, and Mike are gonna do the market research and the management for you. But like I said, get in touch with him and he's gonna do the due diligence, and they're gonna see what is the potential for your brand to make the leap from the USA to Europe. I think we have one more question, which is, I think it was for Dano, if I'm not mistaken. This is from Mei Chen. How long is the sea freight shipping time from China to Japan? And that is the last question, guys. So how long is the sea freight shipping time from China to Japan?
It's less than a week.
Okay,
Very short answer.
Yeah, so that's a very good answer. And I think you were done, guys. We're gonna share the recording tomorrow with everybody because we get attendees from everywhere. So normally, no, Dano, it's okay to stay till 2:30 p.m., but you can watch the recording tomorrow. So we're gonna share the links to get in touch with everybody. And also, just to summarize again, we have some crazy discounts. HelloTax is offering 6 free VAT registrations for the companies who would need that. You just need to get in touch with me, and I'm gonna connect you with the team for that. Dano is offering 1 Amazon Japan Marketplace assessment for brands. The giveaway is $500. You need to get in touch with Dano. We're gonna send his email in the recording, but it's dano@devdevice.com. Let me actually type that in the chat so you can guys get in touch with him if you want to right now. No need to wait till tomorrow. Let's do that. Okay. Now let me continue with the other promotion. So AMZ Advisors for the USA, they're offering a free strategy assessment value. The value is $500. Nick and AMZ Global, they're offering 10% of blueprint expansion plan. The value is $250. GoAvance is offering free feasibility analysis. The value is $1,000. Redfern, which unfortunately we couldn't hear about what they do, we're gonna have the recording separately. We're gonna publish that. They're offering 5 category reports for specific countries in Southeast Asia for the first 5 webinar registrants who reach out. Unfortunately, we don't have the presentation, but the value is $1K. My partnership agent is offering 1 partnership audit, $1K, to tell you if you're good at partnerships. We also, the partnership squad is offering $3K for a brand for expansion. So if you want to go to Europe, we can kind of fund your expansion. We have a funding partner. We have everything. And the last but not the least, I would like to thank the speakers about spending the time to actually present and share all their knowledge, and for all the attendees to staying late. So I would like to wish everybody good morning to Dano in Asia, good day to the guys in the USA and Ramiro in South America, and to everybody in Europe, good night. And yes, to answer Georgie's Simonos questions, can we get offers by email? Yes. We're gonna send the recording and all the offers by email. Don't trust my word. Wait for the email tomorrow, guys. So, adios. How do you say goodbye in Japanese, Dano?
Oh, how you say it? Terimakase, I think. I don't speak Japanese, but
yeah,
I say thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a good one.
everyone.
Thank you.